Hello, welcome to Tov Jewish News Channel. With us today, Hillel Fuld, technology business advisor. Hello, Hillel. Thank you for joining us. In this global in this global struggle that we find ourselves in, Israel relies heavily on the US, both for the legitimacy on the world stage and also to supply its ammunition. So it's very clear what Israel wants. What does the US want?
First of all, I think it's, the very question is problematic. Israel depends. I don't think we actually need to depend. I think it's time that we cut that dependency, or at least, weakened it, because we know the script. America's not here because they love us, from the bottom of their hearts. We know what happened in World War II when they turned us away at their borders. Biden's been a friend, and for that we are grateful. But it's time that Israel understood that no one has our back. No one has ever had our backs, and no one's going to have our backs here. We need to do what's in our best interests, whether or not the U.S. gives us the support. From a U.S. perspective, obviously Israel gives, a ton to the U.S., from our innovation and technology, of course, to having an ally, a democratic ally in the Middle East. So, this is definitely a two-way relationship, unlike, what many anti-Semites in the United States would have you believe, as if, they're giving us billions of dollars of foreign aid and getting nothing in return. Could not be farther from the truth.
Yes, of course, they're using Israel as the best example of the weapon that they sell all across the world, and I think we're giving them much more for this investment than what they invest. So if you break down the picture into age, you see something very interesting. Above 65 in the US, we have very strong support. I believe the number from Ynet was only 4% of the US citizens above 65 believe that Israel should end as a country. But when you look at the younger population, 18 to 24, the picture is very different. 51% think that this struggle in the area would end when Israel ends. Why do you think there's such a gap between the ages?
TikTok. That's it. It's the TikTok generation, right? I mean, this is their classroom today, and you don't have to look too far. You could see that there's a trend on TikTok of American youth standing and declaring their support for Bin Laden and 9/11. I mean, it doesn't get more morally bankrupt than that. And so, this is where these Gen Zers get their information, from TikTok, and they're being fed propaganda. And it's very, very sad and unfortunate. But again, the fact that we're even discussing the fact that it's even part of the dialogue whether Israel has a right to exist. What other country in the world has to prove its right to exist? It is like a joke. We are so ingrained in Western civilization that the narrative that's being perpetuated over and over and over again, no matter whether it's true or a complete lie, we also are starting to let it seep in. We have to remember that Israel has a right to exist, just like any country has a right to exist, and the very discussion of whether or not we have a right to exist in and of itself is morally bankrupt. And we have to not give into that narrative, because it's one big historical fabrication, just like everything else in this war.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we can also see that Israel is condemned 10 times more than disgusting human rights violators such as North Korea, Syria, Iran, put together. Where does it come from? Where's the double standard? Why the double standard?
So yesterday the UN concluded its resolutions for 2023. They have 14 resolutions against Israel and 7 resolutions against the rest of the world combined. Yeah. So, if that doesn't tell you just how morally bankrupt the UN is, then nothing will. The reality is, it's the oldest hatred in the world. It's the hatred of Jews. I know that that's an easy answer and say, blame everything on anti-Semitism. But the reality is this double standard is staggering, and the hypocrisy in the global community is, on the one hand, hard to believe. On the other hand, it should be a surprise to no one, because we're used to it from our history. The script repeats itself over and over and over again. And the reality is that hopefully now, for the first time in our history, our leaders will understand that we need to make our own decisions. We need to stand up and defend ourselves and not be at the mercy of any other government, because, again, we've been down that road and we know what happens when we depend on other governments.
Very clear. One more place where I find it very interesting is that some Jewish communities in the US are very supportive of Israel, but we also get our worst critics from the Jewish community sometimes. what do you think is behind that?
Well, first of all, it's important to mention, that many people in the media like to quote, B'Tselem or Nituri Karta or all these extremist Jewish groups that do not represent anyone. 95% of Jews are Zionists, and the 5% that aren't are the ones that the media loves to quote. So, let's just put things in perspective. That's number one. Number two, in our defense, I will say that we are a compassionate nation. It is not in our nature, to fight, and that's why we're called the Israel Defense Forces, because we defend ourselves. We never attacked anyone. We are a compassionate nation, and so there are Jews who take that compassion too far, and they take it and apply it to evil. And in Jewish scripture, it's very clear that when you apply compassion to the evil, you end up acting evil to the compassionate, and that's what happens. But even more than that, historically speaking, we do this every time in every empire in which we find ourselves. Greek, ancient Greece, Roman Empire, German Empire, Egyptian Empire. I mean, we tried to outdo our hosts, right? Who are the most liberal people in America today? It's the Jews, because we're trying to tell our hosts, we're just like you. And that's when our hosts remind us that we are not just like them. And they do that by means of a tool called anti-Semitism.
You've brought up previously in the conversation that Israel should strive towards independence economically, ammunition-wise, in any other term. We see a big slowdown in the venture funding around the world. It's not a local issue, but for the startup nation, it's obviously a big deal. Do you think that Israel could outperform this global trend? What should Israel do as a country to try and do that? Or what should the Israeli entrepreneurs try and do to avoid this global trend that we currently see?
So, in the actual Bible, in the Old Testament, in the Torah, in Egypt, when Jews were in ancient Egypt, the Torah says that the more we were persecuted, the more they, enslaved us and tortured us, the more we reproduced and the more we flourished. And that has been the story of our lives, of our history. This is what we do. We flourish under pressure. Now is no different. Israeli tech is delivering and over-delivering, overcompensating. Obviously we understand that, many employees and founders are in reserve duty right now. But we are seeing that Israeli tech is overcompensating and performing. Now, I'm not belittling the fact that there is this downturn in the world of tech globally, and I'm not belittling the fact that we are seeing it affect and impact Israeli tech. But long term, as I've said many times in the past, even before this war, when things weren't exactly calm and peaceful here in Israel, I said that in a year from now, in 2 years from now, Israel as a country and Israeli tech will be stronger than ever before, and I stand by that, and I have absolutely no doubt about that.
Which new domains should Israeli tech explore, or what's the hottest currently domains for the Israeli tech?
Well, I mean, obviously AI is taking the world by storm. I wouldn't call AI a domain, because AI is basically in everything. AI is in transportation, AI is in communication, AI is everywhere. So, I wouldn't say that that's, let's say, a domain in and of itself. But I think what's very exciting today, from my perspective, I would say are two sectors. One is transportation. I think that we are going to see the biggest change and shift in transportation that we've ever seen, basically. And in a matter of years, we won't have steering wheels in our cars. And of course, the companies that are leading the way when it comes to autonomous vehicles are, of course, Mobileye and Innoviz, two Israeli companies. So transportation is extremely exciting, and it's going to change drastically over the next couple of years. And I think that another thing that's very exciting that many people talk about is human-computer interaction, the way we interact with our devices. In 2023, it really is quite ridiculous that we use a mouse. But even our phones, if you think about it, swiping on a piece of glass is not, it's pretty primitive behavior. And I think that's going to change in a major way, whether it's glasses, whether it's chips in our brain that obviously Elon Musk wants to start. The way we communicate and interact with our devices is going to fundamentally change over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and I think that Israel is not only innovating, it's also embracing new technologies very quickly. Can you think of something that you see that Israel is going to be pioneering in, specific technology or specific, for example, autonomous vehicles?
Yeah, I mean, listen, healthcare is, the next big frontier. I mean, if you think about it, healthcare, generally speaking, hasn't really evolved. It's the same way, the same medicines, the same things and treatments that we've had for decades. And this, manifests in many different areas, from cancer research to, to other diseases, to mental health, to many other things. Of course, Israel's leading the way. Any cancer research expert will tell you that Israel, is absolutely pioneering some of the leading cancer cures and treatments that are being deployed globally around the world and saving millions of lives. Many of those treatments and cures were developed here in Israel.
Okay, so I'm going back to the first topic that we've discussed, and I think recently you've done quite a shift into explaining Israel abroad and really telling what's really going on. What did you see work best?
I see that there are millions and millions of people around the world who still have integrity, who are still willing to hear and learn and listen and be educated. Unfortunately, we have a large group of people who are very loud and very vocal who are not willing to listen. But in my opinion, they are the minority. The majority of people still do have integrity. And so it's important that, we get out the accurate information that Hamas will not tell the world. And as a result, the mainstream media will not tell the world, because they take all their information from Hamas, which is in and of itself ridiculous. So, it's our job to make sure that the world actually knows the truth about everything that's going on here, on the one hand. And on the other hand, I think it's important that the world understands, and I think the world is understanding, that in this war, maybe unlike any war in the last 80 years, this is the forces of evil versus forces of good, the forces of darkness versus the forces of light. And Israel has and will continue to be the force of light and good in this world. And Hamas, I don't think anybody needs to be reminded what Hamas did on October 7th. These are barbaric, savage people who are the worst of humanity, and Israel needs to eradicate them. Anything less than that would be an absolute colossal failure, not only for Israel, but for all of Western civilization. Because if anyone thinks that Hamas is stopping with Israel, they're not paying attention.
Very clear. Hillel, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining us. Please like and subscribe to Channel Tov. Thank you very much.